Hey, yo, man. I'm sure you've heard of cocaine, right? The white stuff. The white stuff that sends you to heaven, makes you forget all your worries. You know, the 50s and 60s, they were all about weed and all that stuff. But now the new thing is cocaine. Everybody is using it. It's grown right here in the jungles of Colombia. Now, of course, cocaine is no new thing. I mean, the Colombians, they've been planting this stuff for centuries. The coca plant, it is ancient, it has culture behind it. And now all those stabs in America, they are addicted to cocaine and there is no turning back. Now you might think that this nightmarish Nazi state in Colombia will oppose it. I mean, right? That seems very, that seems fair, doesn't it? I mean, these people prescribe heldenomics. What the hell does it even mean? German method, ex-German settlers, and what Criollo nationalism? So you're going to kill all of the black and all of the non-Creole, the mixed, the mestizos, the natives. You're gonna kill everyone. So you might think that this government will, they will oppose cocaine, right? Damn no, they don't. Because they know, like all other governments, that cocaine is the one way that money comes from the United States and into Colombia. Money from the American sphere that comes into Colombia and into the sphere of the unfree world, the so-called unfree world. I mean, that's what it is all about. Money. So you might be communist, you might be nationalist, or you might be these damn Nazis that are causing massacres all over the jungles. But cocaine is bringing in money from the United States into Colombia. And that is exactly what. That is exactly why I am here. The Kempetai don't joke around. Amaterasu, the sun goddess, gives authority to the Emperor of Japan. His rule is absolute. In recent years, our empire has been growing and growing, but has come under the clutches of weak democracy under Takagi Sokichi. Democracy is the rule of mobs. How can an empire built by lions, an empire built from coast to coast, be ruled by a mob of sheep? But no, alas, it is after all the emperor's will, I guess, that Takagi Sokichi has become the prime minister. He has liberalized the economy, liberalized the country, decentralized the colonial system. But it is the emperor's will after all. And if it is the emperor's will to have democracy in Japan, then so be it. For Japan has been triumphant. All of our foes in Asia have been crushed. And the co-prosperity sphere now comes as the one true ruler of Asia. With the sun shining its hot rays upon the entirety of Asia, making it free from European domination, and making Japan, making Tokyo the center point of it all. China, once our arch enemy, but those days are now behind us. Gone are the KMT, gone are the communists, gone is Long Yun, and gone is the old colonial government of Japan, of Japanese China. Instead, after the crushing of Long Yun in the Great Asian War, a new Republic of China was established under Wang Yantai. No longer would the Chinese be given the freedom they once enjoyed in the 50s and the 60s. Now China is under strict Japanese control. And we have given these things funny names. The Wang Jingwei thought. Because after all, to control the mobs of decadent Chinese, we need to control them with ideology. And what does the thought say? Simple. Obey the co-prosperity sphere and prosper together. But if you feel that China is under the clutches of our empire, then you will abhor at what happens in Manchuria. In here also, our men have crushed the weak Manchus. After Emperor Puyi's death, the Guangdong army did not allow his cousin Pujiye to take power. Instead, the great warrior Katakura Tadashi declared that finally Manchukuo would be a colonial government under Japanese domination, under our rule, for it is destined to be ours, like the rest of China. And then we come to the state of Guangdong. My son happens to have some technology back home in Japan. It belongs to the company of Sony. And so does Guangdong. For under Morita Akio, Guangdong has been transformed into the perfect colony. Chairman Akio is smart enough to know that if you crush these rats too much, then they will rise up. So instead, he has given them the carrot. Good wages and comfortable working hours. But get out of line and Chairman Akio will show just how good he is at crushing dissent. And for that, I admire him. The rest of the co-prosperity sphere is made up of client states, except for the Philippines. For the Filipinos rose up in revolution in 1965, and for some time they won, with the help of our American enemies who smuggled in arms to the Filipino rebels. Japan will never accept that. Bishamongten, the war god, arose, and under Takayama Shinobu, the Japanese army crushed the rebels, crushed the Americans, and sent them packing back to America. Japan is now victorious, and our empire is rightfully so. Even in Indonesia, Sukarno managed to crush the rebel forces of Muhammad Hatta. And now Indonesia is securely in our sphere. So is Malaya, Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, and the Khmer Republic. The Azad Hind government and the Union of Burma are our respected allies. After the retirement of Subhash Chandra Bose, Mohan Singh came to power. He's a left-wing nationalist. The word left is like a disease to me. What can you achieve by being decadently in the hands of a mob? What can you achieve by giving all power to the so-called people? The emperor reigns above all, and the emperor reigns above Calcutta. For without our help, this so-called left-wing government wouldn't be able to survive against the Indian government of Atal Bihari Vajpayee either. This doesn't mean that the Japanese empire should get too comfortable, for our enemies lurk in the shadows, like the Viet Minh rebels in the jungles of northern Vietnam, or the so-called provisional government of Malaya under Tun Hussein Om. These people sow the seeds of dissent, and we must forever be on our guard. And yet, the Japanese empire is not a weak house of cards like some other empires. Now, credit where credit is due. Albert Speer has brought a degree of prosperity and stability to the German Reich. But, in my own opinion, National Socialism is nothing but communism with criminals wearing the uniforms. The Nazis are criminals. They are thugs. Thugs ruling over a land. How can they expect to pacify nations by giving more rights to the people living there? I mean, in China we gave them rights just to control them. But China is huge, and we do not intend to settle it like the Nazis intend to settle Eastern Europe. And yet they have given power to weak collaborator governments. And then there's always the dark shadow over Europe. Odenstadt, Bergen, under Heinrich Himmler. People said, hey, Himmler will die in 68. Himmler will die in 69. The old man will die in 70. He will be killed in 71. He will fall in an accident in 72. Germany will invade him in 73. But this never happened. And Heinrich Himmler continues to live and continues his state of terrific horror. And then there's other places. In Deutschland, the Nazis have crushed their own collaborators and now established a strict Reichskommissariat government under H.A. Sinclair de Rochemont. In Denmark, they have allowed the collaborator government to continue. But in Norway, the Nazis have given power to Jonas Lie. Jonas Lie is a fanatic, a rabid dog. His terrific policies include destroying entire cities to feed the German Reich, destroying the will of the people to crush and subjugate them. And while there is nothing inherently wrong in that, the Nazis are criminals, and they do not deserve to rise above Europe like they have done. And then there are their other allies, the Slovak Republic, the Hungarians, the Romanians, and the Serbians. Dragomir Jovanovic was once the mayor of Belgrade, and he has been a loyal dog to his German masters right from that day. Under him, Reichsprotectorate Serbian crushed the communists under Tito and also the Chetniks, and now Serbia is firmly in the German sphere. But elsewhere, the story is different. The British, in the 1860s, it was they who, along with the Americans, opened the gates of Japan. Once the British were forced to be reckoned with, Britannia ruled the waves, and the sun never set on the British Empire just as it doesn't set today on Japan. But now their old glories have been gone. This woman, Margaret Thatcher, she pretends to be a loyal bitch of the Nazis. But Margaret Thatcher is secretly in collusion with the OFN. Thatcher simply wants to build a new Britain which is independent yet sides with Germania enough to not be invaded. And then there's the French state under Joseph Darnand. Joseph Darnand won the French Civil War and came to power. Of all the different communists, fascists, nationalists, and anarchists, it is a surprise that the Nazis have come to power. Now the Jews in France have nowhere to run to, and it is horror which is going to follow. But in other places, we have seen comedies of epic proportions. For the two nations that tried to reject fascism for democracy ended up right back where they started, because their own people did not want democracy. In Italy, the Italians under Ciano democratized, but the people elected a fascist to power in democratic elections. This was followed by a coup by their own emperor, a virtuous emperor cooing the country to re-establish the rule of the mob. Such an emperor is not virtuous. And now Junio Valerio Borghese, the longtime ally of the emperor in his piano solo coup, led his own coup and removed the emperor from practical day-to-day power. We can say that Junio Valerio Borghese is now the shogun of the Italian Empire. Elsewhere, in the Iberian Federation, after the death of Franco, democracy came to light, but it did not survive, for Alejandro Rodriguez de Valsargel and his national conservatives want nothing but a return to the old days, a return to tradition, a return to the old Christianity. The conclusion is simple. You cannot force reforms from above. And if Japan continues down the line of democracy as it has, then it shall spell doom for our own empire. Elsewhere in the Balkans, Italian rule is not absolute. In Bulgaria, they removed their old Tsar from power, and now Nikola Petkov rules the Republic of Bulgaria. It is a grave mistake, for these socialists will destroy what remains of the soul of Bulgaria. Similarly, in Greece, the king himself has sided with these democratic socialists. No, 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 no. The old Greek civilization shall be burned by these socialists. Rainfall shall destroy Greece, and one day they shall remove the king of Greece, just as the Bulgarians removed their czars. A completely different kind of horror has arisen at the top of the map in what remains of Russia. For insanity has taken over. Science is not bad when used for the good of the emperor and his people. But when science is stretched to its limits, when science crushes all traditions, then the civilization is bound to crumble. This is exactly what Andrei Zadnov did in his Federation of Soviet Socialist Republics after fanatically reconquering Russia. After Andrei Zadnov's death, his successor, Vladimir, continues his policies. These people want to run towards the future in a frenzy. They have enacted policies like establishing utopian futurist self-sufficient towns, investing in eugenics for the good of creating a model Soviet man. And they have tried, and many times failed, at establishing weird methods of agriculture in the frigid remains of Siberia. Elsewhere in Kazakhstan, also, a new national communist government has united the lands. The Kazakhs are now ruled under the red flag. But before that, let us see what has happened to the Turks. Islam reigns in the Middle East, but not completely. Turkey represents the Islamic bloc in the Middle East, and Japan supports Turkey. Not openly, of course. For Turkey is opposed by a slew of other pro-German nations. The biggest of all is the United Arab Republic. When the oil wells of Yemen and Iraq began to burn in 1972, nobody had expected that it would lead to simultaneous Ba'athist and Nasserist revolutions all over the Arab world. Within a few years, Yemen, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, Egypt, Sudan had all joined together under one united Arab Republic ruled by a Ba'athist government. At its head is Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr and Salah Jadid from Syria. These people have now heralded a new way for the Arab people. Maybe the Arab tribes will now finally learn civilization. Elsewhere, the Jews have established a state in Israel that is revisionist. This new Israeli state is different from the old days of Mapai. They firmly oppose the United Arab Republic, and a deadly war of civilizations is bound to erupt. The Emirate of Transjordan, meanwhile, finds itself sandwiched. On one hand, it must oppose the Jews and stand with its Arab brothers. But on the other hand, the rabid, anti-monarchist slogans that the United Arab Republic firmly outpours also represent a threat to Transjordan. And only the future will tell with whom the Emir of Jordan sides with. In Iran, the Shah managed to defeat the Islamists supported by us and the communists. And now Iran is back to being a glorious Shahdom. In Turkestan, the Turkestan Legion defeated all the emirs and sultans. And after removing the old regime, Sher Muhammad Khurshid, a mercenary dog that once wandered the steppe, has now taken over the Turkestan Legion. The Turkestan Legion are nothing but German slaves who operate in Central Asia. They represent the farthest German advance and a threat to our own sphere of influence. The Kingdom of Afghanistan, Galat, and India, all of these are non-allying countries. In India, recently the Indian National Congress has been defeated by the Bharatiya Jana Sangh under Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and only the future shall tell whether his government shall continue or the Congress shall make a comeback. And now we move on to our greatest enemy, the Americans. After a brief period of moderation and radicalism, under Wallace F. Bennett and Jackie Kennedy respectively, America is back to conservative democracy under George Romney. Finally, the Americans have learned that the path of liberty is filled with stones, and the American people have now voted in a conservative, paternalistic Mormon. But make no mistake, Romney is not a Dixiecrat or a hater of black people. He is in support of civil rights. In fact, many people say that Romney is a man of liberty, but a man out of touch with reality. A man who thinks that the old America can be brought back without the negative connotations that followed. But in Canada, a very contrasting democratic socialist regime has taken over under Tommy Douglas and his cooperative Commonwealth. Meanwhile, in Ireland and Iceland, democracies reign, and so do in Sweden and in Finland. And now that brings me back to Latin America. As a Kempeitai agent, I was first stationed in China, spying on the troubles in Yunnan. After that, I was stationed in Jakarta, helping Sukarno to crush the rebels. It is from Jakarta that I learned of the news that a Nazi force had conquered Colombia, and that is how Japan sent me to Colombia. Why? Because as I said earlier, we want to take all this money, the cocaine money. We have established new cells in Colombia to exert our own sphere of influence and enact it. The Latin American countries continue to be ruled somewhat by democracies, sometimes by military dictatorships. In Nicaragua, the deadly Somoza dictatorship continues. In Costa Rica and in Panama, democracies rule. In Cuba, Fidel Castro has come about with a new ideology called Revolutionary Gaitismo. Revolutionary Gaitismo rejects both Bolshevism and bourgeoisie democracy. These decadent leftists have opened a fourth international, and only time will tell what happens to them. But there are reports that they have built new contacts with the Federation of Soviet Socialist Republics. In Haiti, another socialist revolution has taken place, but of a completely different caliber. A Pan-Africanist revolution under Jacques Stéphane Alexis. This man has crushed the mulatto aristocracy of Haiti and has now begun massacres. The Haitian civilization is now doomed. But in the Dominican Republic, Rafael Ramphis Trujillo is running another regime of criminals. Under Trujillo, the American mafia have finally found what can be said as a paradise. Casinos, bars, massive construction projects, but best of all, the hand of the government upon them, blessing them. Trujillo's actions are no doubt a big headache for Washington, D.C. But who will replace him? For the Washingtons, the Americans, they fear that if Trujillo is removed, then a new socialist revolution might engulf Haiti just as it did the Dominican Republic. I'm sorry, will engulf the Dominican Republic just as it engulfed Haiti. In Venezuela, Romulo Betancourt rules with his Betancourt Doctrine, the doctrine of not cooperating at all with the Axis powers. Betancourt has decided that not a drop of oil will reach us or the German Reich. We shall teach these foolish men. Venezuelan oil shall reach Japan, for when our agents infiltrate Venezuela through the jungles of Colombia, Venezuela shall burn, and then they shall regret it. In Guyana, the Americans removed the old regime. And now Guyana is an American puppet state. In Brazil, Leonel Brizola has come to power. He's a left-wing Varguist. In other words, he's a socialist dressed in the clothes of nationalism. In Argentina, Cipriano Reyes has come to power with a new ideology called anti-Peronist Peronism. A world of Peronism, but without the oversight of Peron or his crazy wife Isabel Peron. In Paraguay, a Nazi state has been constructed under Mussuhito Villachoa. In Uruguay and in Chile and in Bolivia, democracy is the order of the day. In Ecuador, some socialist thugs have come to power under an ideology centered around the bandit Che Guevara. In Peru, a Christian democracy reigns. And then we come to Africa, the dark land, the land which many said as savages. After the destruction of the war, a ceasefire was signed by which the Union of South Africa continued to exist, but the Nazis triumphed in the rest of Africa. But then Hans Hüttig, the fanatic Nazi, could not manage his vast empire, and the Großafrikanische Reichsstaat collapsed. In its wake came nothing but death and destruction. Warlords such as the esoteric John Okello and Augustine Neto's communist thugs came to power. John Okello is not a man, but a curse on society. Okello is an esoteric Christian. Okello has banned alcohol, smoking, and all sorts of vices for his men. He believes in various spirits, but above all, he believes in one thing: the destruction of the Arab and Indian minorities in Zanzibar and in the areas that he controls. Okello has led to the destruction of the centuries-old civilizations that the Indians and the Arabs have built, with wanton massacres. But that is not to say that the rest of Africa is not filled with savages. Robert Mugabe has led vast pogroms against white settlers in Zimbabwe. And in the rest of Africa, various sorts of fanatic dictatorships, like the dictatorships of Flag Katobe Musopole, rule. Elsewhere in the Congo, the Germans have managed to reassert their authority with the Leopoldville and the Pacte Commission Congo. Leon Pétion was once a Belgian governor, and then he collaborated with the Germans. And today, he rules a German puppet state in the Congo. After crushing the Simba rebellion and the Congo warlords, the Germans have finally managed to save their honor and at least secure a part of Africa back for themselves. But that cannot be said about the rest of Africa, which is under brutal warlords like Idi Amin in Uganda. In West Africa, a new kind of scourge of socialism has taken over: Pan-Africanism. The once great Free French have now been exiled to a small, frigid Antarctic island, Port-aux-Francaise, and in its place, Pan-African dictatorships, corrupt socialist warlords like Kwame Nkrumah and Mathieu Kerekohu have taken power. And all these are under Cameroon, under Felix Roland Momi. Only time will tell if this third world survives the onslaught of the Germans or our own spear, or the Americans. There is a layer in the Sahara, below the Italian sphere of influence, below the United Arab Republic, west of Ethiopia, which has been crushed by the Oromos, and also north of the Congo, and north of West Africa. And this area is called the Tuareg lands, and it is ruled by more traditionalist monarchs like Azawad, Sokoto, Air, or Kanem. Now the last one is ruled by a warlord called Hussein Habre, but Hussein Habre is conservative, an Islamic man in charge of an empire in Kanem. They oppose both the Pan-Africans and the Italians. Similarly, in Algeria, Ferhat Abbas has taken over. Abbas maintains strict neutrality. His only allies are the United Arab Republic, but he does not share their pan-Arab ambitions as well. The world is divided into distinct blocs. Recently, the Spanish, despite harking back to their old fascist ways, have betrayed the Germans and joined the Organization of Free Nations. But despite all that, it is clear from the map that the only secure sphere of influence is our own. Japan is permanent, and it shall remain so. In the coming decades, the fight against the ultra-visionaries, the Nazis, the Americans, and the socialists shall continue, and Japan shall rise up. Banzai!